Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start now. So, everybody that is out there, I am so honored to have our guest, Debra Fine, who I have known about you for such a long time. And I know we've kind of played this game of tag back and forth to actually connect and communicate. And I've admired what you have done for such a long time. I've read articles that you have written. And then for the first time in my life, I actually went to my Kindle and I got your best selling international recognized book called The Fine Art of Small Talk, which is one of five books that you have written. And let's see, so let me make sure I get these right. The Fine Art of Small Talk, The Power of Meeting New People. That's a second book. The Fine Art of the Big Talk, How to Win Clients, Deliver Great Presentations, and Solve Conflicts at Work. And the next one I'm going to read, which I think is great, it's the Beyond Texting, The Fine Art of Face-to-Face Communication for Teenagers. And the last one, The Fine Art of Confident Conversation. Now, I might not have gotten those all chronologically correct, but are those the five books that you've written so far?
Andrew, I'm so impressed. My husband could not have done that
Well, I've got a few.
without a teleprompter. I don't even know if he'd know how many books I wrote. So thank you for that acknowledgement. You did great.
Yeah, no, and these are best-selling books. I mean, if you go to Goodreads or you go to Amazon and you look around, these books are, 95% and above in terms of five-star ratings. I mean, these are,
thanks.
and they're not only good books, they're quick reads. They're quick reads. I mean, you can get through these books in a couple of hours, but truly, I mean, it's one of these things where you're going to keep going back to them because you want to practice what you're writing. I mean, it's one of those important things.
Right.
So it's my great honor to have Debra here with us. Just a couple of housekeeping things as we move forward here. There's another seminar. There's a couple more seminars going on the rest of the week. Tomorrow, I'm going to feature my wife. I'm going to actually interview my wife, Christine, who is an expert at nonprofits. And she's going to be talking about not only working for nonprofits, but also if you work for a nonprofit right now and you are trying to transfer your skills to doing something else, how does that look and what does that look like? She's going to be great. I mean, if you've ever had a question about wanting to work for a nonprofit, if you've ever thought about what that takes, if you ever, feel that there's these myths about what it means to work in the nonprofit world, she's going to be there to talk all about that. And then on Wednesday, we have the great Liz Ryan, who is career expert extraordinaire. She's funny. She's hilarious. She's raw. She's authentic. And she's going to be answering every question you can possibly imagine about looking for a job. And, the hard questions, the awkward questions, the questions that you just didn't know the answer to. I'll give you an example. If you've been a stay-at-home parent, how do you get back into the workforce? It's a great question. If you are in an interview and they ask you what's your greatest weakness, which is one of the most ridiculous questions in the world, but it gets asked, what do you say? If you've been fired before, people get fired, it's a badge of honor. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen. How do you deal with that when you're looking for a job? And, and not only the awkward questions, I mean, the questions that you just have wondered about in terms of how do you sell yourself as a person who might be over the age of 50 and you have got these great skills, but you want to do something else, or you don't want to be a manager anymore. You want to get back out on the front lines of what your skills were. How do you position yourself that way? There's a ton of issues and topics, and she's wonderful. And that's all this is going to be, is just Q&A with Liz Ryan. And then this coming Friday, we have Janine Vanderberg, who is a wonderful, wonderful advocate for people who are, looking for work after the age of 50, and talking about ageism, and talking about intergenerational workforces, and talking to folks who are hiring and what they can do to avoid the issues of bias in age. And she's terrific. She's also going to be talking about how to brand yourself and position yourself as an older job seeker. So we have those is coming up, and then I'm going to be scheduling some more of these seminars over the next couple of weeks as we, cross our fingers, we start to move back into a full throttle economy. But folks, I want to let you know that this is a really great opportunity to take advantage of looking at yourself as a professional, asking yourself some really tough questions about what is it that you want to do? What is your next chapter in your career? Sitting at home with some time on your hands, it's a good time to start dusting off your resume, making some connections and networking with folks. So, have these seminars be just an additional addendum to all of that. I've always said job seeking is a skill. It is something that is learned, and we are bringing on the experts here. We're trying to do everything we can to make job seeking easier. I will tell you this one last thing before we get into my interview. I'm one of those people who actually truly care. I authentically care about helping you to find a job and to help manage and navigate your career. That's what I do for a living. The job board is one aspect of it, but these seminars are another aspect of it. I absolutely love when people write me, they call me, they email me, they text me, and feel free to do so. I'm at ahudson@ahjobslist.com. My phone is always on. It's 720-289-5877. And you can text me at that number as well. Don't hesitate. If you have a question or if you just need a 5-minute motivational talk to help you through an issue, I'm happy to do that. These are tough times. I know there's a lot of people out there who have been laid off. They've been furloughed. They're not sure if their job's coming back. But, we are a resilient nation. We are going to come back stronger and better. And a lot of that is going to be around the workforce. And it'll be interesting to see how, we all realign ourselves in the workforce, whether, employers are going to start saying, wow, these Zoom conferences are actually working pretty good. Maybe we should have people working from home, which I think a lot of people would love. I mean, I think it's going to be a very different dynamic. We don't know yet how that's all going to work out. I think it'll be interesting a year or 2 years from now to kind of see how that all turned out. But with that, one of the aspects of job seeking is doing a lot of talking and a lot of talking about yourself. So Debra, when I first opened up your book and I was reading through it, one of the things that really struck me, and I've always said this about job seeking is very much like dating. It is, you are trying to connect with another person. You're trying to get people attention about, your strengths, and, you're looking across the room and seeing, an employer that wants, who needs somebody to work for them, and you're doing everything you can to put on your best face and make your best impression. And what I really appreciated about your book is this authentic story about what you called yourself an engineer. You were an engineer. I mean, you were a person who was sitting there crunching numbers, looking at schematics, doing all the things that engineers do. And you had this epiphany about communication and conversation. And according to your book, it really came from, being newly single and dating. Is that right?
It is correct. And more importantly, it came from a place of pressure where I was being told as an engineer that when I would work behind an exhibit table in one of those big exhibit halls, and I would represent a project to any of the people here on this call. And I had no problem doing that. And yet they expected me when I went into that hospitality suite to mingle and to interact with customers, clients, whatever. And they tell you, just do that, do it. And I think, well, tell me how to do it. How do I talk to a complete stranger? How do I talk to somebody that wants to talk about something besides the business at hand? In the case of what we're talking about today, at the job interview, right? You go in prepared for a job interview. You'll hear Liz Ryan next week, and she'll give you the proper response to what is your greatest failure. So you're prepared. You know all about them. You've Googled everything to know, but what about that part where you're walking down the hall to go to the interview, to go to their office, or you're waiting for somebody else to walk into the interview And so it's not time to have the interview right now. It's time to chat. And it was mind boggling to me. People would tell me to use that skill, but I didn't have that skill. Maybe Andrew, I'm guessing, I don't know you well. I know of you, you're highly regarded. I've watched you from Frontier Airlines, Mayor Webb, et cetera. And so I think, Andrew, you were born with a gift of gab. Now, I don't know that because I don't know, but you seem like a kind of person born with a gift of gab. Well, I was not born with a gift of gab. So my epiphany was, how are people like Andrew Hudson doing this? And because it seems to benefit their careers, it benefits promotional activity, it benefits getting a job. I have to say, Andrew, I really was raised, and I really believe this with all my heart, that if I got straight A's, if I was conscientious and was a good girl, that I could get the job. And what I had to learn, and it was a shock to my system, and I still don't think it's fair, by the way, is that you also have to have this other layer, not of being a schmoozer, but of being somebody people are comfortable with, that they like, because we pick people we like, whether we admit it or not. So somebody with the same credentials as me, somebody with the same degrees as me, et cetera, would get picked over me because they were likable, and I was this stiff, awkward kind of person. So, but I was newly divorced. I was a single mom to a couple of kids, and I was back on the dating scene, and that was a disaster. That was before apps. I don't think that apps make it any easier. I have no idea.
Right.
I have no experience with that. And that whole rejection thing, and now I think we would call it ghosting. I mean, what people go through during job interviews is the same thing they go through dating. Like, all of a sudden I don't hear from him. I was ghosted. The same thing happens with job interviewing. And then the same thing is, did they not pick me because when I was dating, I used to think, oh, I'm too tall because I happen to be tall, or I'm not blonde. I'm not pretty enough. I need to lose more weight. I mean, I had a whole list of things that was wrong with me. It never occurred to me, maybe there's something wrong with him, or maybe I'm just not his type. And that's that job search thing. That's the combination of those two overlapping, right?
Oh, completely. And but hey, before we go, I just got a note for me to turn up the volume on my microphone. So if there's still a problem, somebody just let me know, and I'll make sure that I'll turn it up even some more. Okay, so one of the things that comes across is that it is a problem that everyone faces. And I mean, I appreciate that you think that I have this gift of gab. I don't. I have my own insecurities. I have I think that everyone likes to stay in their comfort zone. You go into a meeting like you were talking about in your book, you go into a cocktail party, and you immediately go for the people that or you try and find, immediately you find that comfort zone. But God forbid I have to talk to a stranger. I mean, you put yourself at risk when you do that, just as you were saying, risk of embarrassment, of failure, rejection, by just simply opening our mouths and talking to somebody. And why do you think that is? I mean, I've got my own theories about how, why we don't do that. But why is that such a scary thing for people?
Well, it's what you just said, and we fear rejection. But I think there's another level, and although I don't know your audience today, I wish I did. I actually do know a couple members, and so I'll use them as well as myself as an example. I think most of us don't talk to new people, or sort of wait to be, like, when we're being interviewed, we wait for them to ask us questions.
Yeah.
Because highly educated, successful people are looking for the perfect thing to say. So I spent a lifetime looking for the perfect thing to say. I never found it, never. So I never did it. And I think that's another problem in being so prepared and being the best we can possibly be, put our best foot forward. And so we would start a conversation with that recruiter, or that we would make a cold call if we just had the perfect thing to say. But since we don't, we just don't do it. And you know what I remind myself of, Andrew, because I am an introverted heart, although I'm no longer shy. When I walk into a room, or when I have to pick up the phone, and when I say I have to, I wish I hadn't said it that way because it sounds like a burden. And I'm going to throw this out. I say this all the time, especially now during this pandemic. Use the phone feature on your phone. make a personal connection. I mean, this is personal, a Zoom call, obviously, but you can't get somebody on the other end of a FaceTime or Zoom call that you're trying to be considered for an opportunity, or you're asking for their help or guidance or whatever. Stop with the email. Use the phone feature. Now, if they don't return your call, they don't return your call. But if they answer the phone, how lucky are you? Here's the key. There is no perfect thing to say. So stop putting off these connections because we don't have the perfect thing to say. Most of the time, the perfect thing to say is hello. And you know what, Andrew? If I'm at a networking event and I walk up to you and say hello, now I have some great ideas on how to launch conversations, but if I say hello to you, guess what, Andrew? This is what I know about you and everyone else on this call. You decide before I open my mouth whether you're willing to talk to me or not. So even if the phone rings in your office and it's me on the other end and I say, Andrew, this is Debra Fine. We've never met, but somebody told me that you're the expert on, do you have a couple of minutes? You've decided before I get to the word minutes whether you're willing to talk to me or not. It could be based on the fact that your kids need your attention. It could be that you have an appointment. You're going to have a webinar. I don't know what the reason is. There is no perfect thing I could have said to get you to talk to me. You decide whether you're willing to talk to me or not before I come up with that perfect line. So stop looking for that.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on a very good point, and I tell this to job seekers all of the time. Job boards, mine included, offer a lot of false hope. And it's this idea that, I don't have to talk to anybody. I just have to send in my resume. And then miraculously, I'm going to have somebody call me and tell me how wonderful I am and I want an interview. And then I can start to let out that sigh of relief and start going through the process. But there's so many more jobs that are found by making personal connections, by cold calling and by networking. And, all of that it's such a critical part in terms of the job seeking process. Now, in the job seeking process, there's a lot of different touch points. These are opportunities for job seekers to get their brand message across, who we are, what value we offer to an employer. And those touch points are, they're pretty, they're not revolutionary. There's the resumes, there's the cover letters, there's the LinkedIn profile. But the most important one is the conversations that you have, the cold calls and the networking and the interview. And what I've noticed is that when job seekers, they're a lot more likely to get a job offer when they're able to turn a job interview into a job conversation. And that's a very different thing. And I've seen this having consulted with companies about their interviewing process and having interviewed a lot of people as well, is that when you get to that, like the top finalists, the top 3 finalists, any one of those finalists could do the job. I mean, they have been vetted, they've been interviewed prior, they've gotten to this point where it's like between 3 people, they are all sitting in front of a panel of folks for the interview. Only one of them gets the job offer, even though they all 3 could technically, they could do the job at that point. But what happens, and I've seen this, is there is this connection that the person who gets the job offer has made and I look at the people doing the interviewing, and, with the other candidates, they're madly writing down their answers and they're trying to, look up every once in a while, and then they're back writing down the answers to the questions. With the person who turns it into a conversation, the pencils are dropped. There's this relaxation and people are shaking their heads and they're doing all of that kind of positive affirmation kind of thing, but they're having a conversation with the candidate. And ultimately what I see happening is that there is a unanimous vote of those doing the interview that person is the person for the job. I know this is a long way around asking the question, but how do you turn something like a job interview into a conversation with your techniques, in your opinion?
Okay, there's 2 things. Number one is people, just to reiterate what you said, people give their money, people give their vote, people give job offers for the same 2 reasons. One reason is to solve a problem. I'm looking at a candidate because I need to fill this HR requirement. I need to find a sustainability engineer. I need to find a technical writer. Okay, so that's the problem that needs to be solved. Yeah. I need a new president. I need, a new senator. I need whatever. Okay, that's your vote. Um, they're looking for one other thing. They're looking for good feelings. Good feelings aren't, wow, Andrew, I love your shirt, because I can't even see your shirt and whatever. That's just a schmoozy comment. They're looking for good feelings, and good feelings are sort of intangible. We know we feel rapport with people when we feel it. Have you ever met somebody and just feel like you hit it off? Well, now I'm going to say to everyone listening that it's up to me, it's up to you to assume the burden of developing that rapport with each and every person you interact with. I used to hope you would develop rapport with me. Like I said, Andrew, you seem outgoing. You seem, born with the gift of gab. You'll develop rapport with me, or you're the decision maker. We're on the phone. We're walking down the hall. It's during the interview. You're in control. So you'll come up with things to make sure that we feel comfortable in this setting. No, no, no. Even if I'm the candidate, if I work for you, whatever the case may be, it's always up to me to assume the burden of your comfort. So I want to take one step back though, and then I'll give you some what to say. And the step back is this. You talked about the conversation now during the interview. Let me talk about the conversation before the interview, because if we're lucky enough to be one of those three candidates, we've already surmounted a huge challenge just by getting through these. The algorithms is just like, it's maddening now looking for a job. And you're the expert, but I've witnessed this with many friends and colleagues. It is just for them to notice that I have the right keywords and I can't even guess the right keywords. So I just want to make a suggestion that I'm sure you've made to your people, but this is how you can use conversation as well in order to get the interview. And that is, on Andrew Hudson's job list, you identify a job that you want to apply for, okay? Before you apply for it, could you go through your LinkedIn profile? Could you go through your brain, your Rolodex? Could you go through all your friends, your book club, your parents from the soccer team, and think, who do I know that might either be part of this organization that's looking for this candidate, and or know somebody who could help me? Because here's the key to that first conversation. The first conversation is, can you help me? I'm looking at applying for a position at da-da-da. There's a finite job there, but I need to make sure my resume gets on the person's desk or that I get attention. I know you can't take it any further than that, but who do you know that can help me at Ball Aerospace? Who do you know that can help me at whatever? Yeah. So those conversations are critical too, I think, in order to be one of the candidates, because otherwise what I've witnessed happening during job search is for VPs of whatever, they're my friends, they're my colleagues, they can't get noticed because they submit and then they're lost in, I don't know, some kind of outer space. So that's the first conversation you should be thinking about, picking up the phone, reaching out to people. Who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? And going through your LinkedIn network. Secondly, now you're on the interview, whether it be on the phone or in person. And here's the key. Okay, they're going to show an interest in you. That's their job. They have a rote list of questions for you, right? Two things I want you to keep in mind. Always show an interest in them. Always, when there's an opportunity, whether it's when you're walking down the hall, going because they came down to the security at the front desk to walk you down the hall to their desk, or whether it's after the interview, when we're done and we're just sort of closing up, instead of just doing the close where, when will I hear from you, or what are the next steps? Those are important questions. That's part of the business. That's part of the interview. But I want you to be sure to assume the burden of showing an interest in them. Tell me about you. Yeah. Tell me about your background. How did you get into this? Or look around their office, okay? University of Wisconsin, what brought you here to Denver? Or tell me about your experience there in Madison, Wisconsin. I've heard it's a lot like Boulder. Anything to develop rapport with people that has nothing to do with the interview. So I say a job interview is a business conversation. If you can put small talk as a picture frame around any business conversation, that is how you develop business friendships. And all things being equal, people do business with their friends. So two things: show an interest in them, and I can give you more ideas about that if you want in a minute, Andrew. If you can ask them, how's your day going? Tell me about your weekend. Ask them before they ask you if it's a Monday, right? There's another way you can help develop rapport with people, and here it is. When someone says to you at the beginning of a phone call or in person, how are you doing? How are you? How's your day? Because people ask that. It's a rhetorical question. In North America, it means hello. Andrew, if I was lucky enough to see you at the grocery store, which isn't going to happen for a while, but nonetheless, if I was, I'd say, how are you? And here's the problem. You don't know if I really mean that, do you? Because how are you also means hello. So what I want you to consider, though, is when they say to you, how are you? How's your day? How's it going? Whatever innocuous thing they say to you, give them an answer in a sentence. Don't just give them a one-word answer. This is your opportunity to do what I call playing the conversation game, so they can get a window into who you are. So if you said to me today, Andrew, it's a job interview. I'm interviewing with you for a job, and you said, how's it going, Deborah? You know what I would say to you? Well, it's good. It's been an early day, so I'm looking forward to getting to the gym later on today because I couldn't fit it in this morning. And then I stop. Now, obviously I'm not going to a gym right now, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
I'm giving you a factoid about me that has nothing to do with the job interview. Deborah, how's it going? Good. You know, I'm looking forward to the fact that we have a family Zoom 2 days a week, and mine's this Tuesday night. Now, you know, I have a family. I mean, everybody has a family, but I brought it into the conversation.
Yep.
If you're interested in knowing more, you'll say, so who's on the family Zoom call? Or what do you do at the gym? If you're not interested, did I go on and on? Did I brag about my kids' GPAs? Did I mention my aches and pains? No, I did none of that. I just gave you a factoid. So if somebody says to you, how's it going? Say, well, I'm glad the sun's out. I'm going to start planting some vegetables. If that's true about you. Andrew, if I didn't know you at all and I said, how's it going? And you said, well, having 2 kids at home in a pandemic is not what I pictured as my ideal, but we're working on it. Now I know you have kids.
Right.
When somebody asks you an innocuous question, how you doing? How's it going? So now you're on the second interview. How's your week? How's it going? What's new? Yeah. Don't say not much, nothing. Say something. Well, good. I finally got out on a bicycle because it's been 70 degrees here in Denver. Or I'm so happy to say that my mom was sick and now she's doing better. Whatever you can say to bring in something about your personal life without going on and on, that is how you develop rapport, is when you offer a part of yourself, people connect with that. They may not ask you about it at that time, but it's on their radar that you plant seeds for a vegetable garden. And guess what? Even if they don't have a vegetable garden, human beings have vegetable gardens, and that makes you a human being, and people care about human beings and they hire human beings. They don't hire resumes. That's why I ask you to consider playing the conversation game.
Well, you bring up a really good point. I mean, there has been studies done that even the best, most well-written resume, you only get about 60 to 70% of that person. So you get what they did, you get their history, their chronology, the companies, you get all of the things that recruiter is, checking off the box to say, okay, they meet this qualification and that qualification. But that other 40, 50% is your personality, which it's hard to get across on a resume. The other thing is that you talk a lot about people get that feel good about you, and that's you have the opportunity to really get them to feel good about you during an interview and during a conversation. In any branding exercise, the company that is out there advertising and marketing their product, they're going for 2 things: the rational and the emotional. So if somebody can rationally say, okay, this person is qualified, I can see how their values mean a lot to us, how the value of their skills, the value of their background, their experience, their accomplishments, all of that. I understand that connects in my rational side of my brain that they could be a good fit for this company. Then the other part, the emotional, is I really enjoy being around them. I could see them working with our clients. That is a real people person. That's a person that can connect and motivate and inspire. And so that's where that conversation is really your opportunity. Now, here's the other thing that I've noticed is that one of the scariest questions in an interview, and everyone faces it, and I hear it all the time, It's that question that is asked very first. So can you tell us about yourself? Now, I coach job seekers to use that question as an opportunity to take control of the interview from the very beginning. It's the opportunity to immediately start directing the conversation about the reasons why you should be hired. And it's not that again, it's kind of like a rhetorical question. So tell me about yourself. And everyone wants to go back and talk about their companies that they worked for. And, I started out, scooping ice cream at Baskin Robbins. But it's really about, tell us about yourself. What makes you click? What makes you succeed? And so, I've got a couple of good responses that I tell people to start with, but I'm curious, how do you use your techniques to answer that question?
Well, this is what I offer in my program. So I'm an author of books, and I appreciated your introduction, but I'm really a keynote speaker and a trainer on
Right.
rapport and networking. And so what I tell people is the elevator speech, I hope I'm not contradicting anybody that's listening, but the elevator speech is dead. I've heard all the speeches, maybe it's my age, but what I want to hear is some facts. And once again, I'm an engineer by trade, so I can be a black and white person. But when I say, tell me about yourself, give me a concise, factual, 3-bullet statement, okay? Because people love that. So if I say to you, if you said to me, tell me about yourself, I'd say, well, number one, I'm very technically oriented. And I found that I've really worked on my people skills over the past whatever years. And that's really helped me be a better contributor. And then I would stop. And I would either say, if I don't get an indicator for the interview that to tell me more, well, tell me more, Deborah. Well, so what do you mean by that? If I don't get a verbal cue, I would go, is there anything else that you'd like me to elaborate on? Because here's the problem. Sometimes people are expected to ask those questions and they're not really listening for the answers. Or, the one thing we neglected to talk about, Andrew, is when you talked about having people skills, part of people skills is to recognize other people's people skills. Most people that interview us do not have people skills. I mean, let's not give them the benefit of the doubt. They haven't earned it with me. What's really key is to recognize what kind of person is interviewing me. Is it a quiet person? Is it a reserved person? Is it a person that talks like this? You notice, Andrew, you and I are like very, oh yeah. I mean, I have not interrupted you, Andrew, which is a miracle right there. It's a miracle because I just want to talk over you. You're really good about not talking over me, but that I'm like filled with energy and I'm trying to tone it down. We're on a Zoom call, but in real life, if I'm with someone that's more collected, more reserved, thoughtful, I need to behave like that as well. Otherwise, they will tune you out. So don't walk into an interview with a prepared, tell me about yourself that's so big. Somebody that's quiet, more introspective, introverted is not ready for. So read the room, always read the room. And then I like details. Like I tell people in my programs, when your boss is walking down the hall and say, how's it going with that hiring? Give him or her some factoids. It's going well. We interviewed 4 candidates. We're down to 2. That's an elevator speech. Don't just say it's going good. Give some factoids. People like details they can hang their heads on. So that's how I would answer. But the truth is, and I want to be authentic, is that I am not a job search expert by any means.
No, well, I think you're hitting on a lot of the key things that are important there. The only thing I would add is there's a lot of exercises relating to anticipation before you go into an interview. It's anticipating, looking at that job posting and saying, okay, what are the 3 to 5 things that are really critical to doing the job that I am applying for? And then what are the connections between what I've done in the past and what is going to be required of this job?
Right.
And then I also like to, I always like to say, come to the interview not like so robotic that you are just going to repeat things that you think are going to be so important, but at the same time, make sure that you do have some stories and that you are ready to talk about the things that make you tick, because that's one of the most critical things that job employers are looking for. It's like, what is this person all about? What specific examples, stories can you tell me that is going to demonstrate all the stuff that you say on your resume, all the stuff that you're saying that's coming out of your mouth? Give me some examples and some stories. So there's successes, there's projects, there's accomplishments, there's reasons why your boss promoted you, there's reasons why you were named employee of the year. There's all of those things. And I'm not saying you're going to pile that all into that first question, but I think a really good answer to tell me about yourself is, I think one important thing you need to know about me is why my last boss loved me, and
That's great.
and I think one good reason, or one good thing you need to know about me right now is why I was able to increase sales 35% over the past 2 years of my last company. But I mean, it's just this kind of question of, trying to connect and anticipate some of those things that, are on the minds of those people that are interviewing you and wanting to know. But let me move on to another question, because this is totally connected to all of this. You have a chapter in your book called Crimes and Misdemeanors,
Right.
which is really great. It identifies typical scenarios in which people can ruin a conversation. And in the job interview, I've seen this occur too. I mean, basically, in what I've seen in the job interview, there's this wide spectrum. And on one side is the desperado, the person who is so desperate to try and get that job, and they're, making up answers as they go along, and they're making these assumptions about what people want to hear, but it's not really being this authentic person. It's this person who's just this full of desperation to try and get the job. And people don't tune into that very well. On the other side is the person that you identified as the braggart, who's also related to the person you identify as the know-it-all. They boast of their accomplishments, they embellish the truth, they brag about feats, big and small, and they're just self-aggrandizing. And you describe the know-it-all as someone who will mow you down with arrogance and condescension, not interested in anyone else's opinion. These are interview killers. I mean, people, I've seen it, I've been part of it, where it's just like, I don't want this person around me, let alone my employees or my clients. But I know in their heart of hearts, this employee is trying, or this job seeker is trying their hardest, but they come off that way. And I don't think it's completely intentional. Sometimes it might be part of their personality, but how do you practice to avoid those conversation interview crimes?
Okay, and I before I answer that question, I do want to say how important it is to be whoever you are. If you're a quieter person, if you're a vivacious person, if you're a thoughtful person, I'm not suggesting in any way that you put something out there that's not you. I'm just going to suggest that you be self-aware, and that leads me to answering Andrew's question. So sometimes when I use the word monopolizer, and I use that in my list of crimes and misdemeanors, most people hear that word, and I'll ask you all to think about that word for a second. Everyone that's participating today. Okay, you've thought about that word. And my guess is not one person, you have all these people attending today, Andrew, and I'll bet not one person thought, oh, I'm a monopolizer. That's me. That's what I call myself all the time. No, this is what you thought of. Your mother-in-law, your boss, your, sister, your brother who's always bragging about his golf game and he won't be quiet about it. He takes over Thanksgiving dinner. We never think about ourselves. So the quietest person becomes a monopolizer. And this happens during an interview when somebody says, tell me about yourself. And then we're all ready, we're prepared. We're going to tell about being employee of the year and bringing the numbers down and hiring these people and those people and all that other stuff. And the person across from us, they're giving us eye contact. Maybe they're nodding, maybe. But we're still talking about ourselves 3-4 minutes from now. That's what I was trying to highlight before as an example. I think 3-4 minutes about talking about yourself and then checking in to make sure they want more is very important, because you will become a monopolizer after 4 minutes. If you ask me, so Debra, tell me about your favorite trip last summer, because last summer we were all free. What was your favorite trip? Well, 10 minutes later, I'm still talking about my favorite trip because it was so fun and there's so much to talk about, except here's my rule. You're not allowed to talk about yourself for more than 3 to 4 minutes. And then it's up to you to throw the ball back at the other person and give them a chance to talk about themselves. So don't become a monopolizer. Here's some, like you talked about, the know-it-all. Here's the person that, oh, no, I would never, you asked me a question during an interview. I go, I would never do things that way. This is how I've done it in the past, da, 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 da. You come across as a know-it-all. Instead, a better way to approach that is to say, you know, there's two sides of seeing that. I've often found myself doing it this way. What do you think? What you say to the interview, what do you think? Then you're not a know-it-all. It's just like talking about the Broncos. Oh, the Broncos, they don't stand a chance. They're not going to see a Super Bowl for 10 years, Andrew. Well, I am entitled to my opinion, aren't I, Andrew? But then it's up to me to throw the ball back at you and say, and what are your thoughts about the Broncos? And then I become a real conversationalist instead of becoming a know-it-all. How about the interrupter? Now, during a job interview, I bet this is a classic. Somebody starts to describe what they're looking for in this role. And I know me. Oh, I'm the worst. I jump in. Oh no, that's me. I had that experience. Like 4 years ago, I was called on to do. Don't interrupt the interviewer. Okay, let them finish. You know why most of us interrupt people? This is why, Andrew, I interrupt my husband. You want to know why I interrupt my husband? Because he's wrong. And I don't want him to waste one more minute of our precious time, one more drop of his saliva. So I'm going to just jump in there. Stop interrupting people. Let them finish the question and then tell them, you know, I had that experience. Or did you see what I did with Andrew? I wanted to interrupt him, but instead I said, I'll answer your question in a moment, but let me take a step back, Andrew, and talk about da, 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 so that you're sure to get in what you wanted to interrupt with, but you let him finish his sentence. Now, in the case of my husband, of course, Andrew, I do let him finish. I don't interrupt him, but then I do tell him how wrong he is. So I don't miss out on that opportunity. So that's another example. Another example of conversation killers, I would think during interviews, sort of when we want to top the other person or match the other person.
Yeah.
Here's the interviewer. He or she says, well, when I went to grad school at Columbia, oh, Columbia, I went to Harvard. Oh, what a great experience I had there. Shut up, Deborah. Don't tell, and I didn't go to Harvard, by the way. I'm making this part up. You can tell him or her about Harvard when they finish talking about themselves. Don't try to top somebody else. Oh, yes, I spent 10 years in finance as well and took a leap and reinvented myself. Don't match the other person. Let them finish. And then if they show an interest in you or your background, or you feel that the commonality is important, then introduce it. But too often we're ready. We're waiting to like top you or match you. I mean, women do this. Like I say to my girlfriend, so Julie, how have you been? Oh, great, Deborah. You know, I spent some time going, there's so many good sales. I bought this whole new ensemble. It's great. I had and my response is, oh, that's great, Julie. I've done the same thing. You should see some of the deals I got. I got this. I got, shut up, Deborah. Let's hear what Julie has to say about the deals she got. Or our kids. Oh, did you notice, Andrew, you talked about your kids today, right? We talked about your kids pre-call. Did I mention my kids to you?
No.
Why? Do you know why? See, I know all about my kids. I know, I mean, as much as they're willing to let me know, of course. You know what I don't know about? Your kids. And that is, it's so easy to talk about ourselves, even boring people like me, even quiet people like me. So don't fall into that trap. The focus is on the interviewer. Andrew is my interviewer today. He's my boss today. I'm assuming the burden of his comfort today. It's not about me. It's about him, making him feel comfortable. Excuse me a second.
Yeah, no, it's a good lesson. And I think, you know, as someone who quoted or somebody commented in our comment section, the lesson is listen and be a good listener. One of the things, and you talk about this, is, you know, it drives me crazy when people are very quick to jump in with an answer to something you're trying to say before the question is even asked.
Right.
And that, it just drives me nuts, because it's like they're making this assumption that what they know exactly, they're reading your mind about what you're going to ask, and it could be completely irrelevant. So that happens. That happens a lot too. And but the thing that I really try and get job seekers to focus on is there is, like I said, these two extremes. There's the desperado, there's the arrogant, the know-it-all. But then in the sweet spot in the middle is the person who is authentic and they're confident. And they are not afraid to take ownership for their accomplishments. They're not afraid to take ownership for their skills. They can talk about themselves in a confident way, backed up with stories about how their accomplishments are connected to the job. What for so many people, it's a level of insecurity when they get to these two extremes. Like I say, I don't think it's completely intentional. Sometimes, people's personalities are just what they are. But we also have this sense of we have to be humble. We have to have this level of humility when we talk about ourselves. Like, oh, shucks, it was nothing. I raised, $30 million for that capital project, or shucks, really, it was a team effort. It was a teamwork that got that whole thing done. As opposed to saying, you know what, I led that effort. I inspired and motivated people to make it happen. When I went and talked to a CFO about increasing our budget because this project was important, he would listen to me because he was confident in what I was about to tell him. I mean, those are the kinds of things. It's not bragging, and it's telling very authentically and very genuinely what it is you were able to do. I tell this one story about my kid who was playing baseball at Cherry Creek, and we were watching the game, and he hits a triple in the last inning, and he drives two people home, and we were down by one, and we ended up winning the game. And he comes running up to after the game, and I told him, I said, man, you need to know that it was your hit that won the game. And my wife was just aghast. She's like, oh my gosh, absolutely not. This was a team effort. He's part of the team. And I was like, were we at the same baseball game? Did you just see what I saw? I mean, but it is. I mean, it's this societal thing about how we cannot take credit for ourselves. We can't. And when I see it with job seekers in particular, it's kind of what you were saying. It's like we come up with these reasons or these bad excuses as to certain things about ourselves. So, so the question, I guess, is, how do you use language to be confident? How do you use language to be authentic? Or how do you use language to take credit for things, particularly in an interview? There's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes people tend to say, oh no, we have to be humble all the time.
Well, I mean, you have to gauge that for yourself, and because you have to gauge the person across from you. A lot of people are threatened who are interviewing you. Your credentials may be far superior or may be better. So you have to be cautious about saying, I was employee of the year 3 times in a row, because they may take that as because of their insecurity. So use your EQ there, I would say.
Yeah.
But I also think that the key is you're right, Andrew. Most of us don't like to talk about ourselves. We're prepared to answer questions about, we brought in this much revenue, raised this much money, hired this many people, or whatever. That we don't feel like is bragging, but to talk about ourselves and our talent is a difficult thing to talk about. So I say that's preparation. I need to prepare myself to answer those questions when they come up in a concise way that fits for me. I believe the reason I had success in the past because I did this, this, and this. But that, we can't do that off the cuff, most of us, I don't think. Those of us that can do it off the cuff tend to be the braggarts, because they go on and on, or just it comes easily to them. So we have to be super careful about that. But here's the key here. As I said, I'm not an expert on job search. What I am an expert on is making people feel comfortable in conversation or networking. And I think that the real key here is before or after the interview, as well as during, if there's an opportunity, because sometimes don't you sit down with a VP for, let's say, sales, and she says, Debra, this has gone pretty well. I want to bring in our IT person. You do a lot of interaction with her, and so I want to make sure she gets to meet you as well today. So she calls up the IT person, and it takes that person, oh my gosh, 5 minutes to make it around the corner, down the hall? Like, we have 5 full minutes to fill here, right, where the interviewer is not asking me questions. That I believe you need to be prepared for. As we discussed earlier, tell me about yourself. What do you enjoy the most about your work? Here's one of my favorite things to ask people, Andrew, to get to know them. I do not ask people, are you married? What if they say, where are we headed with this conversation? Do you have any kids? No. Well, that's the end of that conversation. Or if they do have kids, then they won't shut up. So either way, I'm not asking that question. What I like to ask people, if it's comfortable, it's our second interview. It's our first interview, but it's gone well, and we're waiting for that IT director to come down the hall. I say, so what keeps you busy outside of your work? It's my favorite way to get to know somebody, because they'll tell you what they want you to know. If I ask you what keeps you busy outside of your work, Andrew, you might talk about, I know that you are a performer. You play music all over town. You might talk about your kids. All of us have other things going on in our lives besides the work that we do. If you show a genuine interest in somebody and say, what keeps you busy outside of work? You'll be amazed at the answers you'll get, and you'll be amazed at how you cultivate the connection with that interviewer. Trust me, nobody else is asking them anything about them. You will be a standout. You're not bragging, you're not talking about yourself, you're not doing anything. And be sure that when they start telling you about their kids, that you don't, oh, I have kids too. Let them know you have kids when it's appropriate or not. Let them shine, let them be the brilliant one, and always look for things besides diplomas in their offices. Look for a class ring, look for a lapel pin, look for a picture drawn by a kid. Don't assume it's their kid, by the way. Please don't make assumptions about people. Instead say, tell me about that picture. And you'll develop rapport with people with those types of things, and you will stand out in the crowd, because most people don't do that.
You talked a lot about early on, when you're looking for jobs and you find a job that matches your criteria, to go to LinkedIn, and you can just do a deep dive on the company and on people that you might know. But also LinkedIn is a really great place to find out about the people that might be interviewing you as well. And on top of that, going to the website of the company where they might have the bios of the executives there, or even Googling somebody's name. If you know you're going to go into an interview with the marketing director, you can type in marketing director for that company and find out information about them from Facebook, information about them from Twitter, or from all kinds of different things the internet's an amazing tool. I want to get to another. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Be careful with that, Andrew. And I always do it with humor, because when I always Google anybody that I'm going to ever talk to, ever. And you can find out amazing things, that they golf, they have kids, they had a Halloween party, whatever. So preface it with, I Google stalked you and I learned that you played golf, because otherwise people are thrown off a little bit.
Oh, that's true.
Much about them.
Yeah. So one of the things that I find is really difficult with a lot of job seekers is dealing with nerves. People get really nervous going into an interview. They might be prepared, they might have everything, but they are nervous. Clinical debilitating stage fright's a real thing. And I've dealt with job seekers at, even just recently at a job fair, where I actually had to take one person by the hand to the different booths where employers wanted to meet her. She had a great resume. It was almost impossible for her to even talk. She was so scared and didn't know what to say. And when I would go around and make introductions for her on her behalf, and once she started getting into the conversation, she was fine. What are some techniques for managing nerves when you're about to go into an interview, or even for small talk?
Well, I think what you painted there was with this woman, or with stage fright, is sort of an extreme. So let's bring it back for the rest of us, like somebody like me, who is an introvert. Let's say you invited me to an open house at your company, or I went to a job fair. This is what I do before I enter the room. I turn it into a task. So the interview is a task, the networking opportunity is a task. We're all good at tasks. That's why we're educated. That's why we've done well in our work. That's why I'm even wearing clean clothes during a pandemic. I'm into tasks. I get the laundry done. Okay, so turn this into a task. Here's your task. Breathe. Be aware of your body language. I'd like to try to picture me at a function where I'm like this. I look nervous. I look ill at ease. You've seen people at functions, their whole body looks like that. They're not aware of their body language. Nobody does that on purpose. So before you walk in, be aware of your body language. tell yourself, I'm going to fake it till I make it. I fake it a lot, Andrew. I walk into networking events where there's 100 people I've never met. I take a deep breath and I tell myself, here's the task. You'll meet 3 new people here. That's the task. This is how you'll launch the conversation. That's for another interview someday, Andrew. Here's how you launch the conversation. This is a task. And guess what? When you finish your task, Deborah, whether it be the interview, the networking event, whatever, guess what I get to do? Drink. I mean, if it's a networking party, if it's an interview, I get to go home and be with my dog. I mean, I just paint it as a task, be prepared, and self-talk yourself into putting your shoulders up, looking comfortable and relaxed. It may take you 5 seconds, it may take you 5 minutes, and then you'll finally be feeling it. But you must prepare yourself so that you don't exhibit any nervousness or being ill at ease, because when somebody's around someone that appears ill at ease, it makes them uncomfortable and we don't get hired. I don't even care. I'm speaking as an engineer who's as dorky as they come. I'm supposed to be ill at ease. They still didn't like you when you were that ill at ease. They didn't hire you or promote you. So try to just be aware of who you are and remember, it's like starting a conversation with a stranger. The biggest fear about a job interview is that we'll be rejected, right? Isn't that the fear, that we won't get hired and that we're desperate for a job? So think about it. What could be worse? Well, what could be worse is driving I-25 and getting hit by a car. That could be worse. And when I paint that picture of what could be worse, it makes it easier to get through the job interview. It's not as bad as it feels right now. There are worse things. There's COVID-19, for example. There's someone that I know that's sick with it. That's worse than walking into a job interview or picking up the phone. And that calms me down when I think about, is this really as hard as it seems? Is it really as risky as it seems? And I paint the new picture for myself. But turning it into a task is my best advice.
Well, and I also recommend people get your book. I think you know, this, like I say, this is a good read, but it is also it's kind of like a technique book if you're learning a musical instrument. In your skill, you're learning about small talk and how to overcome a lot of these things that we all go through. It's not just for reading; it's for going in, highlighting, and putting these things into practice. And I mean that. I mean, well, I think that people who get this book are going to use it in a very functional way. It's not just for reading and saying, oh, aha, okay, I get some of these issues. It's actually going back and saying, okay, I'm going to try this. There's so many good things in here about it. I mean, even just the what was the section you had? It's about 5 pages of just icebreakers. You know, just icebreakers. I mean, just questions that you can ask people that are, you know, that help you get into a comfortable conversation. So we have a question here, you know, some of this stuff is case by case, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but how do you address negative issues when you have to have a conversation? I know one of your books is about, you know, dealing with awkward or dealing with difficult discussions in the business setting, but how do you deal with negative situations or negative conversations?
I think that obviously preparation is key, because that's going to come up during interviews all the time. You know, especially if you left the last organization under less than positive terms, that you need to, once again, like I talked about the elevator speech, come up with 2 to 3 points. You know, I was challenged because they constantly, you know, were trying to reinvent the group we were in, and we had different leadership all the time. Instead of saying the leadership there was poor, because I think once you label something with a negative, when you label people in a negative way, that you're not looked kindly upon, or it's just not heard in the right way, but instead to say, you know, I struggled. It's all about me. I struggled because of the shift in leadership, the constant shift in leadership, and I needed more consistency. So I think if we use the I word more than the them, then we're better off. Not to say that I'm not a good team player. Say that I believe I'm an excellent team player, yet there were constant shifts in leadership. So you want to soften it. You don't want to say I had a terrible boss. Ask you, what did you think of your boss? Then you have to tell the truth. He was not well trained, and I believe if they had given him better tools, it would have been a more successful operation. Try to find positive if you can.
Yeah, I think in general, these are the kinds of the questions in terms of people who might have been fired or they left a situation that was just not, a good fit for themselves. I think a lot of recruiters, they are not necessarily seeing this as a massive red flag. They want to get to the bottom of it, but how you respond to it and how you discuss it is going to help them. I mean, recruiters, they're people, and they realize,
Right.
and stuff happens. It might have even happened to them. I mean, it's
Right.
so. I think you're absolutely right in just terms of anticipation. Back to one of the issues we talked about. A couple of people were asking about this. Um, you know, the idea about stalking people online to find out information. Uh,
Right.
I think for the most part, if you have a LinkedIn profile, you can anticipate that people are going to look at it. You want them to look at it.
Right.
That includes bosses, and that includes people that you might be interviewing with, and so forth. So I don't really find a. I mean, it's how you use that information, as Deborah said, that I think is important. But
Well,
but I think
LinkedIn.
actually going out and looking and finding out about people by Googling their name and stuff, I don't think that's that big of an issue.
Well, Andrew, the LinkedIn thing, I couldn't agree more. You put it out there, that's a business profile. But as recently as this last year, I worked for Google,
Uh,
did a team program for them. And I walked in and said I was shocked, actually. I said to her, wow, I saw your kids' Halloween's costumes. They were amazing. And she said, how did you see that? She was. I said, well, it was on Facebook. How'd you see that on Facebook? I have it blocked. I said, well, I guess not. I mean, she
oh, yeah.
was irritated with me.
She's from Google.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, she did, she actually wrote me later and said, thanks for letting me know. My husband was horrified. I'm not allowed to put my kids, whatever. But here's the deal. It's because of that is why I now say, the LinkedIn stuff, if you put that you golf on LinkedIn, then it's cool. But if it's on Facebook or something else about your family, I say, I did a little Google stalking. I see you have kids that's why I said that, because of my experience.
Yeah.
Maddie wrote, she's a recruiter. She wrote that she appreciates having the research done. And I couldn't agree more. You should do your research and you should know as much about them as you possibly can, but you don't want to do it in a way that they might find a little too personal for you if it's not
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. I'm an open book. My wife comes home sometimes and she goes, I heard from 10 people today about something that happened with the kids, and I didn't even know about it.
Right.
And I mean, that's just the way I am. I mean, that's just how it was. But you're right. And I think how you use that information, how you bring it up yeah, you're absolutely right. Let's see. There was one other thing I wanted to get to you. I know we've been going over an hour now. Also, folks out there, please let us know if you have more questions, and also know if you don't have a question now, but you think of it later. I'm absolutely 100% going to respond to you. So feel free to email me. And if I don't have the answer, I'll make sure to send it off to Deborah and she can answer it. It's ahudson@ahjobslist.com. Let's see. What else was I going to ask you about? There was something very important. And oh yeah, the cold call. The cold call. I break down networking this way. There are the people out there. Let me preface this by saying cold calling is probably one of the most awkward things for people, but it's an important part of the job seeking process, and it's part of the big spectrum of networking. So networking, I kind of break it down into three tiers. Your most comfortable network are the people that know you the best. They are folks that are going to call you back. They're going to be your cheerleaders. They're going to be your advocates. They're the folks who have said, if you ever think about leaving your company, call me first. I'd love to, get you into the mix. They're the ones who will open up their Rolodex and give you names of 5 other people. They're going to call and be on your team to help you find a job. Your second level is going to be, as you say, kind of like the soccer parents that live down the street that might work for a company you're interested in. You know them well enough that you can make a call and expect a call back, or it might be somebody at your church or your synagogue, or it could be somebody in a professional association who knows about you. You're not close friends, but you're associated with them in such a way. And then the third level is the cold call. That cold call is the most uncomfortable thing for most people in terms of the job search. And my advice is always, if you feel uncomfortable about it, make sure that you write out a small script and that you have questions that you want to ask this person if you get in touch with them. Not everyone's going to call you back, and that's part of it as well. And, don't take that personally. Don't, that's just the way it is. But I can guarantee you, everyone you talk to in your job search has had to look for a job before. They've been down this path. So it's not as uncomfortable or awkward as you might think it is, because they've been there and they know that this is what happens when you're out looking for a job. Saying all of that, what are some icebreakers for cold calls?
Well, this is a tough one because the real key is to be polite and to say, "This is Debra Fine. Andrew, you don't know me. I'm determined to be considered for the opportunity and da da da. Will you give me a few minutes of your time?" Because I think if you don't ask for permission or ask for time or show respect,
Yeah.
it's just a little too intense. I mean, I more appreciate what your recruiters here that are on this call say about that. But I mean, I try to set it up in advance, even a cold call, to send an
Yeah.
email. I doubt you could send a text because I'm guessing their cell phone isn't available to you. When I want to talk to anybody, I try to, even my own children, I'm sorry to say, who are adults, I would say, would tomorrow morning be a good time to talk to you on the phone?
Right.
Because it's just hard. But on the other hand, if you're willing to do that, pick up the phone and just cold call into somebody, tell them why, use self-disclosure right off the bat, who you are and why you're calling. Because otherwise they might hang up on you, or they might think you're trying to sell them something. And then you might say, what would it take to get 2 minutes of your time right now to just hear me out on why I think I'm the best candidate? So I've always used those words when I used to be I am in sales. I sell for myself all the time. And I'll often say to a meeting planner that's considering me and to other speakers, what will it take for you to select me instead of those two other speakers? And it's amazing what I learn, what will it take? So I would say that would be one of my favorite ways to start the conversation. What would it take for me to get 2 to 3 minutes of your time to tell you why I think I'm a good fit for this? And if they say, well, this is a terrible time, say, well, would this afternoon or tomorrow morning be better? Which would be better? I'll call you back. Or they say, okay, you've got 2 minutes, go. Better be ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then never leave the conversation without saying, what are the next steps? Basically you're issuing, I always say, don't exit a conversation without issuing an invitation. And I would like to make a comment about that. So you might be job seeking now because you don't have work, or you might be job seeking because you're unhappy with your work and you want to move out, or you want to reinvent yourself, or whatever the reasons may be. But now, whether it's a pandemic or not, build your network now. So those people that Andrew talked about on the soccer field, on the at associations, don't be a stranger, because when somebody reaches out to me that I've never even met, but they were on the soccer field with me. Well, I don't know if you remember, our kids played together. Well, you never came over and said hi, but now you're asking for help in your job search. Really? I think that's sort of odd for me. Stay in touch with people. Um, quarterly. How are you doing? How has this pandemic hit you the hardest? Can we have a phone call now? Cultivate that network now. Don't wait until you need it, because that's not the time to do it. And don't be a stranger at professional associations. Walk up to people, get to know them and meet them, because that is your network and that is who you're going to call. Anyways, back to the icebreaker. That's the best way. I mean, to say, how are you today is it's almost too salesy for me. How are you today? And you didn't even have an appointment to call me? I'm good. How about you? Why are you calling me? Tell me why you're calling me. If you can add humor, and this is what I always say to people on a cold call, Andrew, and so I'm giving it to all your partners. I think you have over 100 now on this call, but I'm giving it to you for free. It's my favorite way to start to break the ice on a phone call. Hi, Debra Fine here, looking for a job with your company. I decided to use the phone feature on my phone. I know that's unique. I hope you'll give me a couple of minutes. No, but I mean, people laugh. Whenever I say I use the phone feature on my phone, people just laugh. So you can all have it, use it. It's great. It's a great icebreaker.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great advice. It really is. I mean, um, I'm all, if you get the opportunity to talk to somebody, and better yet, if you get the opportunity to meet somebody face to face, then it's kind of like what you say, an invitation. It's the sales and marketing ask. It's like, okay, how do you try and get that person committed to helping you? Is it about introducing you to the HR director? Is it about opening up their Rolodex and giving you a couple names? Is it about just reviewing my resume? In a lot of this, cold calling is also about informational interviews. And the informational interview is a sly way of just getting in front of somebody and asking them about their careers and asking them, how did you get to this point? And tell me more about your company. And those are important too. To your point, and I told a professional salesperson this who was looking for a job. He said, I've tried calling companies, and in the last 2 weeks I made 20 phone calls and I got 3 calls back. He says, this is just not working. And I said, look, I said, you're a salesperson, right? I said, if you made 20 prospect calls and you got 3 calls back, what would you call that? He said, oh, that'd be a great week. I said, yeah, I mean, it's all in context. So don't just give up on certain things because they're not happening right away. You're becoming a better job seeker and you're progressing your job search every step of the way when you try different things. And some things might work better than other things, and you might latch onto those things because they work better for you and it fits your style as a job seeker. But I will tell you this, and then I'm going to, let's hold on a sec. We got a couple other questions here. How do you develop rapport and connection in a panel interview with 5 interviewers who just keep asking questions?
Well, number one, make sure you memorize their names when you meet them. First, I'm telling you, how those of you who are in finance have to memorize this or that. If you're in real estate, every ethics, whatever you have to memorize, you can do it if you try really hard. My husband will tell you he can't remember people's names, but he can remember the lineup for every professional sports team from hockey to baseball. So his memory is fine. He just doesn't care about people's names. So you meet those 5 people. If you can get away with it and you have a scratch pad with you or you get their business cards, line them up and where they're sitting at the table, those cards, so you can do shout outs. Well, Joe, I appreciate that question. Use their name. That's the number one thing you can do right off of the bat. The other thing is when you walk in that room and they say, Debra, because you probably met either the recruiter on the phone or in person already, and now you get to meet this lineup of 3 to 5 on a panel, do not wait for them to extend their hand to you. Now, I'm saying this now with the pandemic weighing on a cloud over my head. Things have probably changed. I'm not certain. So I'll just give the advice that I would have given 2 months ago. When that would have happened to me, whether it's a table of 8 or a panel, I walk up to them. I don't just sit down and wait to be properly introduced. I walk up and say, hi, Debra Fine, Joe, whatever, Marianne, whatever, Michelle, and I shake each person's hand. Now, if shaking hands is out, if we're going to use elbows or if we're just going to nod, you still go up. Don't go sit in your seat. Don't go sit in your seat. You walk in the room with confidence, even if it's faked confidence. You walk up and say, I just want to meet each of you personally. Oh, you're Marianne. Marianne, good to meet you. Joe, you're, good to meet you. Good, and memorize their names so you can do shout outs during the course of this interview. So even though they're pepper, you can't control them. There is no way, if they're going to pepper you with questions, that's what they're going to do. You're not going to change that. What you can change is you can show that you paid attention, that you're a great listener, and that names are important. And if their name is hard to pronounce, make sure I'm so sorry. Will you help me with your name so that you don't use everybody's who's named Joe, Marianne, and John, and then don't, talk to the person who was born in Cambodia because they have an odd name. So I think that's the number one way to build rapport with people.
Yeah, and some of the other basic things that folks should remember is smile a lot. And just like we like to see people who are nodding their heads in affirmation of our answers, feel free to also nod your head in affirmation of their questions as well. Right. And take your time. Don't feel as if you have to rush through your answers. Take your time. And if you don't understand a question, ask them to rephrase it. So say, I just want to make sure that I answer this correctly. So can you rephrase your question? There's a lot of different things that are helpful in that way. The other thing I was going to say, let me see if I can remember it because it was important. And I might not. Well, we'll leave it at that. There's a lot of little techniques. Oh yes, bridging. And bridging, if people want it, I have an entire document on bridging. And what this basically means is you're the subject matter expert in an interview. A lot of people who interview you are not the subject matter expert, and they really don't understand completely what it is that you do or what your skills actually mean. And so there's a lot of bridging statements that you can use to take that question back. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. I'm happy to send that document to anybody who asks me for it. And then obviously the last thing about an interview is you're going to get asked the question, is there anything you'd like to ask us? And that's an important part too. I mean, being prepared to ask questions of people at the end of an interview, a company. And I remember one good question is, why do you like to work here? And it's very interesting. What I found is that the companies that are really, people really enjoy working at, they're falling over themselves to try and tell you why this is such a great company to work for. And the ones that don't are the people who have very short answers about wanting to work here. It's an interesting dynamic that you see. So I think we are going over, we've already gone over about 15 minutes, and I appreciate your time, Debra. And,
Sure.
you know, once again, it's the Fine Art of Small Talk. It's an international bestseller. Debra has written 4 other books. Correct me if I'm wrong, the meat of your business is doing motivational talks surrounding this. And she works for corporations, she works for associations, she works for any organization. That's her profession. And we could have a whole nother conversation about your reinvention from being an engineer to a motivational speaker. But can you repeat your website just so folks know how to reach
Oh,
you?
sure. And anybody is welcome to email me. So first I'll give the website and it'll make my email address even easier. The website is debrafine.com. It's spelled DebraFine.com. If you spell it wrong, you'll still find me because I was lucky enough to buy all those domains. And my email is Debra, Debra, at debrafine.com. So it's easy, or just Google me because I'm on the whole first page. Thank goodness, right?
Oh yeah, and if you work for a company, if you work for an organization, I mean, we've been talking about how all this stuff applies to looking for a job, but it is also such critical information in terms of business and success in business. And if you Google her, because I have Googled her, you'll see there's a lot of videos that have been put up with Debra giving presentations and things of that sort. You can really get a flavor of what she's all about in terms of her speaking career. Anything else you'd like to add, Debra?
This has been a great experience. And I'm out of a job right now, I think, Andrew, and that, you know, I speak to live audiences. That's my bread and butter and my joy. So those participants today who aren't working, my heart goes out to you. I have one of my kids owns a restaurant in Lodo, Denver, and obviously this is a brutal thing that's happened. So my heart goes out to everybody looking for work and struggling with that. And if I can help, feel free to email me.
Oh, fantastic. And just as a reminder, tomorrow we're going to have another seminar with Christine Marquez Hudson, my wife, to talk about working in nonprofits. Wednesday is the great Liz Ryan, career expert extraordinaire. And then on Friday, we're going to have Janine Vanderberg talking about job seeking for older Americans. So thanks so much for everybody for attending. Thank you, Debra. And it's much appreciated. We are still seeing a couple of questions coming through, and we'll try and get to those offline. But thanks again so much for participating. It means a lot to everybody.